venomous snakes, poisonous plants, and toxic honey. Are you brave enough to hear this tale? In this podcast, we're traveling into the deadly world of toxicology. Toxicology is the study of poison and its antidotes. Throughout history, deadly potions have been used for many horrible deeds. Mysterious deaths and strange illnesses usually point to one thing: poison. One king wanted to learn all its dark secrets. In fact, some say he became poison-obsessed. The king spent years experimenting in his secret lab, mixing killer substances. He soon learned poison was not always what he expected. Sometimes it stung like a spider's bite, but other times, poison tasted as sweet as honey. This is the story of Mithridates VI, Jupiter, the king of poison.
Hi, young historians. Welcome to another exciting episode of Anytime Now. I'm Brooke, co-founder of Honest History. Have you ever found yourself captivated by something odd? Maybe it was figuring out how a machine works or learning more about a topic that interests you. Like you, the person in this story became obsessed with an idea of creating the perfect antidote for poisons and would not rest until he found the cure. And while obsessing over something can often lead a person to madness, in some cases, it can also lead to greatness. Curiosity is what led to many groundbreaking discoveries and inventions that have lasted the test of time. So get ready, young historians, for this adventure through time is going to be sweet.
Our story begins a long time ago in the ancient kingdom of Pontus. This beautiful kingdom rested along the Black Sea in modern-day Turkey. It was ruled by a mighty king who lived in a grand palace by the water. The king's palace was a crossroads between east and west. Inside its walls, you could find philosophers, traders, pirates, soldiers, and snake charmers. These travelers came from different lands and spoke many different languages. The king's oldest son, Mithridates, grew up inside this palace and learned from its many visitors. The young prince dreamed of the day when he would take the throne and rule the ancient kingdom. As a boy, Mithridates learned about Greek and Persian culture. He rode horses and collected gems and rocks. He also studied the different animals, plants, and minerals found throughout the kingdom. The lands near the kingdom of Pontus were filled with all sorts of dangerous creatures. In the mountains, you could find venomous snakes. In the lakes, there were deadly fish and even poisonous ducks. There were also tales of strange honey hidden in the forest. Some said this sweet treat drove people mad. As a boy, Mithridates loved learning about these dangerous plants and animals. There was a science to it that fascinated him. It wasn't just about making deadly poisons, it was also about making antidotes. In ancient times, people believed that every poison had a counterpoison. With the right mixture, some plants and animals could be used as medicine. Poison was going to play a big role in Mithridates' life, more than he could have ever predicted. It all began when Mithridates was about 11 years old. His father was holding a grand banquet inside the palace. Guests gathered in a large room to feast on a meal of meat, fish, olives, peaches, and cherries. The sound of drums and harps filled the air as dancers moved around the room. After the guests were seated, they clanged their cups together and took their first sips. But something wasn't right. Mithridates' father began gasping for air. He dropped his cup and fell to the ground. Panic filled the room, but nothing could be done. It was too late. The king was dead. Mithridates stared at the cup on the ground. He knew what had happened. Someone had poisoned his father's drink. He He looked around at the people standing in the palace. These were the people who had taught him and protected him as a child. Did they poison his father? Then he looked at his mother. Did she know this would happen? He had his suspicions. His mother wanted power, and with the king gone, she would rule until Mithridates was older. More thoughts began to fill his head.
What if someone tries to kill me?
He worried.
Will I be next?
The young prince was convinced someone in the palace would try to poison him. He needed to get away. He needed to hide. That's when Mithridates came up with a secret plan. He gathered his closest friends and whispered his idea in their ears. Together, the boys would pack up their bags and ride their horses deep into the forest. They did not know when or if they would ever return. For years, the boys lived in the wilderness. During this time, Mithridates learned about his kingdom. He studied its valleys, rivers, mountains, animals, and plants. One plant caught his attention. It had rich green leaves and bright pink flowers. It was called a rhododendron. At first glance, it looked harmless, but Mithridates knew better. The flowers had a deadly sap. In the forest, near the rhododendron, Mithridates heard the buzzing of bees. He turned and saw a honeycomb, dripping in a reddish honey. It looked different from any honey he had seen before. He remembered a story he had heard when he was a boy. It was from an ancient Greek philosopher named Xenophon. Xenophon told a strange tale of a Greek army. The soldiers had been marching near the Black Sea when they spotted wild beehives. Hungry, the men devoured the sweet honey inside. Strangely, the men collapsed to the ground. They became terribly sick and confused. For 3 days, they could not even stand. Mithridates looked at the beehives in front of him. The story began to make a lot more sense. The bees used the poisonous rhododendron nearby to make a toxic honey. This was mad honey, the honey that had made the Greek army sick. In the wilderness, the boys learned about this dangerous honey and many other poisons. When they were hunting, they could dip their arrows into the deadly rhododendron sap. Using the plants and animals around them, they could learn how to cure poisonous snake bites. Throughout the kingdom, people heard stories about the young king. There were tales of his daring adventures in the forest. Some of them were true, others a little too incredible to believe. But while he was away, Mithridates heard rumors of a new enemy. Romans had been spotted on the outskirts of Pontus. Were these Romans plotting to take his kingdom? Mithridates knew it was time to return. He mounted his horse and turned towards the palace. The kingdom of Pontus had been without its king for long enough. It was time to take back the throne. Mithridates was a strong but cruel ruler. Since his father's death, he was suspicious of everyone. The king carried a weapon and was quick to punish anyone who crossed him. He constantly worried about one thing: poison. Guards stood at the entrance of the palace kitchen, watching so no one touched the king's food. Royal tasters tested his meals to make sure that they were safe to eat. Mithridates dreamed of creating a magical potion, something that would cure all poisons. He called it a universal antidote. If he had this antidote, he wouldn't have to worry anymore. He would finally be safe. Mithridates ran experiment after experiment trying to figure out different antidotes. In small doses, Mithridates believed toxic animals and plants would not kill him. Instead, these small doses would train his body to survive even deadlier poisons. He grew gardens filled with toxic flowers. He even had his own poisonous ducks, using their blood and eggs for his own deadly experiments. And here's a bit of gruesome history. He tested his poisons and antidotes on prisoners.
Hi, young historians! Time for a quick break from this amazing story to tell you a bit more about honest history. If you're enjoying this episode, then you'll love Honest History's magazines and books. Each one is filled with important adventures through the past, like the story of Cheng Yi Sao, a Chinese woman who commanded one of the largest pirate fleets in history, to Mansa Musa from Africa, one of the wealthiest people to ever live. You can pick up a copy or subscribe and receive 3 issues delivered straight to your doorstep every 3 months. Just go to honesthistory.co and use code AnyTimeNow for a 10% discount. That's honesthistory.co and special promo code AnyTimeNow. Okay, let's get back to the story.
Rumor has it that Mithridates made his universal antidote. It became known as Mithridatium, named after the king. What was in this mysterious potion? It was thought to have over 50 different ingredients. Some say it was mixed with the blood of poisonous ducks. Others say it was made with venomous snakes and salamanders. Was one of the ingredients mad honey? It's possible, but we may never know for sure. The recipe no longer exists. Many people have tried to recreate Mithridatium, but no one has cracked the secret formula. This has left many historians to wonder,
Did the universal antidote actually exist? Or was it all a lie?
tales of Mithridatium worried Mithridates' enemies. If the king had a cure for everything, could he ever be killed? This is exactly what Mithridates wanted people to think. Mithridates hoped to make his kingdom strong once again. He built castles and a great army for protection. With his army, he set out to conquer new lands. But as Mithridates' kingdom grew stronger, the Roman Republic grew angry. Mithridates tried to take over the lands that were under Roman rule. In 88 BCE, the Roman Republic declared war on Mithridates. The Romans quickly learned the king would not go down without a fight. Mithridates became Rome's most hated enemy. He inspired crowds to rebel against the Roman rule and killed thousands of Roman people. After 20 years of war, the Roman general Pompey the Great led his army into Mithridates' kingdom. The king was now an old man, and Pompey hoped this would be his last battle. But Mithridates had a secret weapon the Romans didn't know about. His secret weapon tasted deliciously sweet. As the Roman troops marched towards Pontus, Mithridates' army devised a plan. They placed honeycomb along the Romans' path. Honey was the perfect snack for the tired soldiers. But this was no ordinary honey. This was mad honey. The same honey that made the Greek army sick years ago. After placing the honeycomb, Mithridates' army hid themselves from view. Then they waited. Soon, they saw Pompey's soldiers marching up the path. The soldiers were surprised to see fresh honeycomb dripping with honey. They stopped to gobble up the sweet treat. But they quickly realized their mistake. They became horribly sick and fell to the ground. They couldn't see, they couldn't even move. Now was Mithridates' chance. His army jumped out from their hiding place and ran towards Pompey's men. Within minutes, they killed 1,000 Roman soldiers. This was a great victory for the kingdom of Pontus. For several years, Pompey's army chased after Mithridates, but the clever king knew how to hide. He could slip away into the wilderness, just like he did when he was a boy. Finally, in 63 BCE, the chase ended. Mithridates had returned to the palace and soon heard the bad news. His own son and the last of his soldiers had turned against him. Pompey's army was quickly closing in on the palace. Mithridates realized he was losing, but he would rather die than be captured by the Romans. As he stood in the palace waiting for the Roman soldiers to appear, he pulled out a small vial. Inside it, there was poison. Legend has it that Mithridates and his 2 daughters drank the poison. His daughters died, but Mithridates survived. The poison had not been enough to kill the king. Then, Mithridates turned to a servant and asked him to do a terrible deed.
If you will kill me,
The king said to his servant,
It will save me from being a captive led in a Roman triumph.
Moments later, the Roman soldiers burst into the room. King Mithridates was already dead. The king of poison was no more. After Mithridates' death, many were eager to discover the king's secrets. How did he make his universal antidote? Was there a recipe for Mithridatium? Pompey the Great searched through Mithridates' papers, hunting for a clue. Did he ever find the recipe? Some historians believe he did, but he only shared it with his closest friends. Others think Pompey burned Mithridates' papers, and the recipe was lost forever. Or, just maybe, the secret recipe was never written down. To this day, many legends surround the king's life. The Romans remembered Mithridates as a great king. He had bravely fought against Roman rule for many years. But this ruthless leader was also a ruthless scientist. His experiments with deadly potions have fascinated historians for centuries. We may never uncover all the mysteries of the Poison King.
Welcome back. After this episode, I'm never going to look at honey the same way. And isn't that the beautiful thing about history? It changes the way we see the world. Learning about one person or moment in history can do so much to inform us about the past and help shape our future. If anything, maybe this episode will inspire a young scientist to go out and discover the formula to Mithridatium and change the world with the special antidote. That's all for now, but if you can't wait until the next episode, be sure to check out issue 17 of Honest History. You can learn all about the ancient Greeks and the civilization that helped shape the Western world. See you all next time. This episode was hosted by Sean Jordan and written by Heidi Coburn. Production was led by Randall Lawrence. To learn more about this episode, including more about the host, visit us at honesthistory.co and follow along for updates on social media at Honest History.